Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guest tonight is the current Iron Man scribe, or I guess recently, sadly, former Iron Man scribe, Spencer Ackerman. Spencer, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am doing okay. It's, summer and the world is the world, but I have comics and I have you on the line, so that makes for a slightly better uh moment at least. So I reread Iron Man today and really appreciated all of the layers you brought to the Doom War. Um and really to Tony Stark and Stark Industries, as well as um the character itself, which is not something that's handled as often. Um You want to talk to me about how that came about? Where you started, what you pitched? I know you pitched the second arc first.
Yeah. I did a miniseries for DC called Waller versus Wildstorm, and in early 2024, sent that over to some Marvel editors, and just sort of wanted to see if I could interest Marvel in the kind of comics that I had produced with Waller versus Wildstorm. Thinking that, maybe if I got people to read those, I might get to write like an 8-page backup or an annual or a digital comic or something like that. And they came back and offered me Iron Man, which I was shocked, which I absolutely did not expect, and something that I found thrilling. And they had sort of started out from the perspective that they were interested in something that would sort of be Iron Man's story in this forthcoming Doctor Doom centric status quo that Ryan North was captaining. And they offered me the chance to, if I wanted to, stay out of that, but I wanted to kind of dive right in. The idea of doing um, a crossover, particularly one that Ryan was behind. I'm a big Ryan North fan. Um,
Me too.
was irresistible to me. So, with some kind of baseline guidance for how the incoming editor who I would be working with kind of saw Iron Man's general trajectory, I came up with what would eventually become the Insurgent Iron Man. That's the story that goes from issue 6 to issue 10, which is out on the stands at the time that we're recording this. Then some scheduling stuff happened, and I kind of learned what being part of a crossover is like, with a certain amount of additional elements that just aren't under your control. So I learned that the the crossover wouldn't begin until probably around our fourth issue. So they needed me to come up with an entirely new, introduce the run. I spent a little time panicking about that. It was absolutely not what I had pitched at all. Uh, Decided I would pitch something that I thought would be a good way of both introducing some of the themes that would come to the Doom story and kind of bridge from what Jerry Duggan at that time still ongoing Invincible Iron Man was doing, sort of a baton pass. Marvel did not like the initial story that I pitched for those 3 issues and asked me to come up with something else. I took some of those elements, came up with what becomes our first arc, which is a 3-part arc called the Stark Roxxon War. The mandate on that one was, be classic but original. So sort of within that kind of uh, Zen-like advice, I came up with what would be the first three issues, or I thought would be the first three issues. And then I got paired with this brilliant artist named Julius Autois, who you guys are about to see, really put in some incredible work with Benjamin Percy on Punisher Red Band. It's going to come out pretty soon. Julius, I talked with to try and get a sense of what he did and did not like to draw. He came up with some fantastic elements that would go into the run, and especially into the first three issues. The thing that people will probably remember about the run, if they remember anything, is that we gave Iron Man a giant sword. That was Julius's idea, and he designed that really to perfection. So figured we had a three-issue onboarding to where we would get to go to the Doom stuff. So I loaded that with a bunch of stuff that I hoped would both, on the one hand, make Tony's decisions in the Doom arc make sense, and also throw in a bunch of misdirection so that the stuff he does is somewhat contextualized, but also really shocks people and surprises people for where we go. In particular, that would be, from the start of the Doom arc, the idea was always like Tony Stark might not want to be in the weapons business, but the weapons business has stuff to say about that and puts him kind of back into that position. And that becomes kind of a driving engine of the stuff that's in issues 6 to 10. So the first three issues are, Tony fighting valiantly against ever selling weapons again. Then more scheduling issues occurred, and we learned that the One World Under Doom arc wouldn't really get going until our sixth issue. So I had to come up with two issues to kind of bridge to there. So did some kind of more of the same stuff, took some stuff that I had reported on in my day job as a journalist, particularly when they suggested that we use Ironheart, because at the time, the Ironheart TV show that came out on Disney Plus was going to happen at the beginning of the year. So the suggestion was, by the time the show would come out, Iron Man #4 would be on the stand. So could we have some cool synergy and give Ironheart some shine in the Iron Man book? So that really appealed to me. I was a fan of Eve Ewing's Ironheart run. That's very much a
Oh
Chicago
yes.
story. So we did um, we did two issues with that, and then into the Doom arc that becomes the back half of the run.
So, I mean, throughout the run, you set up kind of the power of organized labor and the dangers of consolidated power and how thing I mean as you talked just a moment ago, Tony's done with arms, but arms aren't done with him. How once you get to that point, it also becomes hard to separate from the status quo. um I mean, is that first, am I hitting the themes that you meant to hit? And then talk to me about how you think that's important, and what you were trying to say in the Iron Man world.
So first, on the organized labor point, one thing that I wanted to do from the start of the run was build out what Tony's relationship is with his workers and introduce a character who would organize uh, the labor force at Stark Unlimited, and then a driving engine of the run would be this character and organized labor within Stark Industries, uh, attaining a degree of power and control for the workforce that they haven't had in Iron Man's long character history. That became a character that Julius and I co-created called Ramon Vicente, who is an Afghanistan veteran, an ex-Marine, and the sort of person who can articulate Labor's point of view to Tony. We start out kind of adversarially. We continue and get kind of more adversarial after a period where it seems like at first Tony, because he's a hero, sees that Ramon is right about the degree of control that Tony and really no one else in the company has over the workaday lives of all of the people who work for him. So he kind of agrees, readily to the organizing drive. If anyone listening to this is part of a union or has been part of starting a union in their workforce, then you know that the company recognizing the union is the easy part. The hard part
Yeah,
is, and the important part is the contract that
right.
comes after that. So I wanted to have like in the first burst, Tony being like, "Yeah, no problem, I'll recognize the union," and then Iron Man stuff gets in the way, and then when we come back to that character is going to like lead a walkout at the factory where they work because Tony hasn't negotiated the contract, and we would find ways in which we would preserve Tony's character and his hero coding through that while making a real point about uh the power of labor and the vast power differential between labor and capital. um and then have that also be a conversation that Tony have while his imperatives for the plot that he hatches to stop Doom completely get in the way of that. And then Iron Man has to quickly figure out a way of squaring this circle, because by the time we get to this moment of conflict with Ramon and with the Union, Iron Man has to bring weapons back online, and he needs the Union to cooperate with him. And so that became a way of giving the Union institutional power on the Stark board. That is kind of a model that we don't really have in the United States, but is more common in European and specifically German labor relations. And that was a place I always knew I wanted to end. Like I knew that we wanted to I knew that I wanted to leave Iron Man if I made like some structural contribution to the tapestry of this, decades long ongoing narrative. It was going to be to empower labor and keep labor institutionally empowered in this company. Now, whoever writes the book next can do with that or not do with that as they please. They may not be interested in this stuff at all, and more power to them either way. But now at
We'll
least
cross our
I
fingers that they
leave
pop
them
up
with
someday.
well, I leave them with this element. They can do with it as they like. Same thing with the sword, which is kind of the other more superhero-y bequest that we end the run with. But beyond that, particularly with the Doom story, I wanted to tell a story about proxy warfare, about great power competition as there becomes a kind of fight for the sponsorship of a Latvian terrorist group between Tony as an American hero and the Winter Guard as Russian heroes as a way of, undermining Doctor Doom and figuring out which of these, global powers will be dominant in what they're already looking forward to as a post-Doom era. Doctor Doom has some different ideas about that. And then I wanted as well to kind of look at um, when you've got a threat that's considered sort of the purest evil, the greatest danger is, as in the Marvel universe, Doctor Doom represents. How far is too far in going to stop him? What is the limits of permissibility? And to get at that, Julius and I came up with another character named Vishta Teru, who I wanted to use as a kind of person who comes to view Iron Man as a pure hero, um, someone who hates Doctor Doom, and who, in hearing all of this very hardcore um, Iron Man plotting, would take that as license to then go what they would not consider, but Iron Man would, as only slightly further, but commit a really unambiguous act of terrorism, viewing that as something unfortunate, but ultimately excusable and permissible. People die and innocent people die in war, and what you're really after is an effect. So he takes a very ends justify the means approach to this, and Tony can't abide by that. And I really wanted the conflict between the two of them to feel heartbreaking. I wanted to sell a relationship between these two characters and kind of um, give it a bit of a sense in the first like three and a half issues where Tony and Vishta kind of show up and build a relationship that, like, almost like with Ironheart, Iron Man might be like coming up with a mentee, like he'll be mentoring this character and all of this heroism, and then ultimately one of the things I introduced in the beginning of the run was a kind of return with a kind of different character playing the role in the armor of the Ironmonger, classic Iron Man villain who appears in the first Iron Man movie, and for several decades has kind of fallen by the wayside. First, I made that character Justine Hammer, who is a fun character. I always like the Crimson Cowl. Like the idea of like two very Oedipal characters, like a failed son and a failed daughter, kind of fighting it out. And then Vishnu was going to become the new Ironmonger, kind of by degree, and you can sort of see it sort of slowly happening. There was also kind of a horror element to this, but as the book went along and I learned more about um, budgeting story pages for a run and editing out some stuff that ultimately, you have to make some hard choices about, that kind of fell a little bit, further back. But that was kind of what I wanted to get across, and also, throw in some other riffs on stuff that I'm interested in, whether it was surveillance capitalism, whether it was the transformation of all sports media into gambling over the last couple years since the Supreme Court more or less legalized that.
Yep.
Different stuff about um, the relationship between surveillance and freedom. Um, and then, that kind of just became that became my Iron Man run.
Um, One of the things that I mean, you picked up on some of the things that are deep dives that you picked up on. So I always think that anything you do may or may not be picked up now, but it may be picked up 10 years from now or whatever. And one of the other things that I really uh, I don't know if you had time to have Tony start soul searching, but you sure gave him a lot of questions to ask himself. Um, from can he actually be Iron Man and run a company and all of that at the same time, to what is his line? Um, you forced Tony to look at the world in ways that he hadn't had to look at the world before. How much did that just come naturally, and how much was that you going, I want to knock. I mean, you called him a fail son there, and I don't think anybody's called Tony Stark a fail son before that I've heard, and I love that you did, because uh he he may be an overachieving fail son, but he still doesn't understand so much of the world because he's never had to. And you kind of made him confront a lot of it.
Yeah, I think the kind of way of doing that is by never compromising on the core of the character being a hero. I think there's for a variety of reasons that I understand, even if I might not agree with, it's real easy to see Iron Man and Tony Stark as a villain. We sure have gotten a lot of stories over the past like 25 years in particular, maybe we can say 15, 20, that whether or not, he's acting as a villain or in more of like an anti-heroic perspective, but nevertheless, he's sort of played the functional role of a villain. I didn't want to do that. It's not how I see the character, and I think it has the ironic effect of dampening the issues that you raise if they're just going to a villain, because then they're kind of easier for a reader to ignore or slough off, or kind of be more aggressively guided by a writer throughout rather than provoking thought and having Tony be someone who has to wrestle with, you know, whether what he's doing is right or not. And one of the ways that I tried to go about grounding that is, you would mention, he's thinking about stuff he hasn't had to confront before. Wealth is a veil. Uh, he operates behind because he can't not. Even during the moments in his character history where he's lost all of his money, he still is nevertheless the person he grew up as, which is an unfathomably wealthy person. But when it's pointed out to him, then he realizes, how deep his mistakes are, and I kind of have that kind of tortured element of him throughout. When he's, in the second arc, uh, there's a kind of quasi police black site where much of the action takes place, particularly in issue 5. And we learn that site in particular used to be, when his father ran the company, a Stark Enterprises factory that deindustrialized and left the whole area blighted and hundreds of people out of work until the whole neighborhood around it becomes basically the sort of thing that a kind of, in this case, active supervillain would view as ripe for the opportunity to gentrify. And so Tony, as he's going through this place, kind of deals with the weight of that decision. Not even his decision, but a decision of his father's and his company's, leading to such an emerging disaster that he has to deal with it as a superhero. So that was kind of the approach I tried to take with it.
Yeah. And I think what I found most compelling about the run in general was that like you put Tony through problem solving challenges that I don't think I've seen in a while, where he had to shift between his different roles, his different um, masks, um, and really, I mean, I loved it when. I mean, to spoil a little from I think issue 7, when he's being confronted about the fact that he hasn't started negotiations, that there is no contract yet, and oh, their big ask is a seat on the board, and it seems for a moment like it's going to be a deal breaker, and then he gives him 3, which is the hero Tony Stark, because God knows, as particularly in the United States, they'd have to fight way harder for that than they should, even though it makes an awful lot of sense. Um, but it's the line after that I loved, which is that it wouldn't be a sacrifice if it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
He's aware that um he's going to have to give up some level of control to be able to do things the right way. He admits this whole time that, oh, I've got all these people working with me that are working for me, that their entire lives get decided on my whims. Um, and that's not necessarily like good. And I'm a
Yeah, I mean,
hero.
you would sort of ask yourself, would that be how a hero acts? And if
Right,
the answer is no, then a hero is compelled to do something about it that transforms that relationship.
right,
While at the same time, because of the way the story operates, that's also the most expedient way that he accomplishes what he is trying to accomplish against Doctor Doom.
right,
So he gets he has the heroic thing laid out for him against the interest of his control of this company, but against the interest of the control of his company is the interest of his plot to save the world. And so at that point, the kind of, heavens open, and it aligns enough. And there is probably also the moment where like I do the most uh writerly interference in the story and like turn to face the camera while wearing the Iron Man mask. Because here's the moment where I can kind of give a perspective that I think is valuable in our world as it is in a world where Iron Man has got to confront, by the rules of Ryan's story in One World Under Doom, that not only is Doom in charge of the world, but a whole lot of people want it that way. That it's not Doom forcibly conquering the world. For a whole lot of people, this is Doom liberating the world from the wreckage of the existing, status quo. And so Iron Man, turns to his, admiring young sidekick and says, we can't save the world from Doctor Doom only to go back to a status quo that failed people like Ramon, and I couldn't see that. And that's something I think
right.
is true about the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that start to finish your run, your Waller versus Wildstorm as well, um, mirrors many things in the world, offers a parable for things happening. I am not as deep into One World Under Doom, but I've read like there's 3 or 4 issues of North's part. And I too love Ryan North, so I know that it's one of those things that once it's done, I'm taking the deep dive into the whole event. I'm not good at following the event week to week across a dozen comics. It's just too much. Um, but Ryan North is also the king of showing you things through superheroes or through Star Trek or through whatever that are very real. Um, but you get them in parable forms, so you're not getting hit over the head. Um, so I mean, I know that the different the differences in the way I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this right. I mean, we're talking about a large number of the Marvel world picking Doom, that they feel liberated. I know that in your day job, you spend a lot of time looking at how different parts of the world view other parts of the world, how every story we have has another side to it, with heroes and villains on both sides in simplistic terms. So what about the One World Under Doom um, attracted you to it? What do you like about it? Um, and then how 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 was it to bring Iron Man into it in a kind of ambiguous role? Because he is trying to be the hero, but man, does he make some really tough decisions that we've seen made in
So
the world. But yeah.
yeah. So first, when it was described to me before I ever saw any of Ryan's scripts, all I knew was so Ryan North is going to do a crossover in which Doom is in charge of the Marvel Universe. And I don't think I let my editor finish the sentence before I said I wanted to be part of that. That was all of the selling that she had to do for me. I didn't know a thing about what this story was or how he was going to do it. I got to read his scripts for the whole thing, and that was just tremendous. It was hard for me, not to fanboy out and to be professional about it. Um, but like Ryan introduces like these really like massive concepts for how like the world is going to operate under Doom. So like in issue one, Doom outlaws war. And I thought to myself, well, how does that work? Like how would that actually happen? Um, and sort of the more I thought about that, the more um, I saw a kind of path for what Iron Man's role in the status quo would be, which is like Doom may declare that war is outlawed, but a whole lot of people who are now chafing under the rule of Doom are going to have a lot to say about that. Some of them will be, like some of them will be state actors. Like in this case, the Winter Guard substitutes for, a Kremlin position that's, outwardly accepting of Doom, and then kind of beneath that stratum, figuring out how to both position Russia to survive the Doom reign and then to come out on top when it inevitably collapses. Whereas Iron Man would be approaching this in a much different way. And from the start, my editor, in so many words, said that what she thought Iron Man would do in this arc was basically become a terrorist. And I said, I can do that. That would probably be the thing that people who would the people who would be coming to this book, the who read my journalism, would probably be looking for me to do anyway. But I didn't want Iron Man to kind of be the person performing the act of terror. I wanted Iron Man. Do you know who Qasem Soleimani was? Does that name ring a bell?
Vaguely, but let's assume my readers or my
Yeah.
listeners don't.
So Qasem Soleimani, for like the first 2 decades of the 21st century, was the head of the Quds Force for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. He was essentially in charge of Iran's Middle East strategy. He became tremendously powerful, uh, basically fighting a proxy war against the United States during the U.S. occupation that basically saw Iran win the Iraq War. And in 2020, Trump executes him. Uh, Dark be more like a Qasem Soleimani, someone directing proxies, maneuvering them in place to do the thing that he wants to see accomplished against Doom. And then I wanted uh, the organization doing that work to be loathsome, like to be someone, to be a series of just like red flag after red flag after red flag, outwardly racist, uh clearly bloodthirsty, almost uh reflexively uh violent, if not amoral, highly teleological. So like really, really motivated, of course, but something that I modeled on like the Azov Battalion in Ukraine or the Nusra Front in Syria, uh, which, as you can imagine, was really mind blowing when the descendant of Nusra, HTS, ended up conquering Damascus pretty much in the middle of my run. So we've got this proxy force that's just like a loathsome, repellent organization, the kind of organizations that has made up many a U.S. proxy war in the past, not only U.S. but certainly U.S. Um, and then have Iron Man uh, act to use them really as cannon fodder. We find out in the second issue of the arc that Iron Man is not actually trying to overthrow Doom in Latveria. He's trying to force Doom into a quagmire. And so that means giving this terrorist group the means to wage a long war against Doom, short of the means to win it. And that's a very dirty situation. And it's also one that you can say applies to the world outside our window. So I wanted to
Yep.
really explore that. And then, you know, by virtue somewhat of, this being Iron Man and him being like so determined and so calculated and Doom being so evil, there would be a kind of tacit momentum in the first couple issues for the reader to kind of accept Tony's moral reasoning that it might be like really brutal, but it's Doom after all. And Iron Man in overthrowing Doom as global emperor would of course be justified in this. And then in the middle of the second to last issue, really have a line cross that Iron Man doesn't expect to cross and have it not be Iron Man who directly crosses that line, but then once it is crossed, have him immediately understand how his actions set the tone for that line to be crossed. And then the rest of the arc has to be Iron Man stopping the person who crosses that line, thinking that they've kind of acted along what his plan was. So it's basically the story of a dirty war that falls apart.
Yeah, I gotta say, for people who read your journalism regularly as well as your comic books, uh, uh, it was uh, less surprising that Tony took that decision, and more. I gotta say that in like that weird like the fanboy in me uh, interacting with the realist in me was almost jumping for joy when it wasn't Tony that crossed the line. That he only inspired the guy to cross the line, because I could totally see it have going. I mean, uh, too often throughout history, really, um, people have justified really even otherwise good people, though sometimes it's hard to call them good people after they've, I'm just to go way back in history. The biggest problem I have when I think of Truman is like, can you call
Yeah.
anybody who drops that bomb a good man? I mean, he did so many good things, and I understand his reasoning, and I understand difficulty he had making the decision and whatnot. But like at some point, and like, does that, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
in the
And
hero sense, like, does that damn him? Because if you make that decision that, yep, you're no longer a good person after you did that, but it is still the wrong decision, is where it gets really messy.
yeah, I wanted it to be messy. I didn't want it to
Yeah.
be the sort. I didn't want it to be the sort of story where like the lines are drawn really cleanly, and you can come out of the story thinking like, well, that's sort of neatly resolved. I wanted it to be the sort of thing that people would wrestle with, and there would be, I think, among some very hardcore readers, there is an interpretation available. Not saying it's the right interpretation, quote unquote, but there is an interpretation available that Vishta might be right. That I know there is some real life analogs of Vishta in that situation that very strongly consider their side to be right after
Absolutely.
doing what he does. And so I wanted it to be something that after you finished reading, you would kind of ask yourself, like, you know, was Iron Man's position, right up to a point, and then it went off the rails? Was it off the rails from the start? Did Iron Man ultimately redeem this situation? Did Iron Man uh, compromise himself by up until the very end of the book, trying to save Vishta after he crosses the line?
Right.
Or was that a kind of um, version of Iron Man trying to keep his own rationalizations alive? So I wanted to be
Yeah.
something that hopefully spurred some thought just beyond what was on the page.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly does for me. Um, it's it's not an easy read. Which doesn't make it like I mean it's still a great superhero comic. I don't want to say that it's like, oh, it doesn't belong in the super,
No, I'm not offended.
it's
I think
no, I know that
I
you're not,
appreciate it.
but I also want to boost your sales. I don't want to drive anybody away from it. It can be an easy read. I don't think it's as fun as an easy read, or at least I don't think it's as fulfilling as an easy read. Um, there are so many layers. I'm gonna plug Forever Wars. Go pay for Forever Wars at least long enough.
Thank you.
I mean, frankly, you should pay for Forever Wars, period. But at least pay for Forever Wars long enough to go read. He is Spencer got into some deep dives on each issue that I've been trying to avoid tonight just because he has to talk about Iron Man. So we're sticking to Iron Man.
Yeah, thank you. I found having not really been an experienced fiction writer, um, there is a catharsis for approaching some of the themes that I approach in my journalism through a fictional lens, and especially a superhero lens. It's the most fun writing I've ever had. I tried to keep Iron Man, even while doing some of the heavier stuff. I tried to keep it fun. I tried to throw in a whole bunch of jokes in the book while not have it
Yep.
come across as perhaps too try hard. There are some things in the book that in retrospect, uh maybe we could have done without, but no regrets. I had some fun writing it, and part of
I,
the fun of doing this is like working it out on the page and allowing yourself to kind of go down some kind of gag routes while writing it. So to
so
do
I mean,
while
tangential.
giving themes that probably define the run.
I mean, tangentially, because it's a nonfiction turned into a comic, but like one of my favorite nonfiction comics is the adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning. Um, and one of the things that always sticks with me is I saw an interview of Ibrahim Kendi talking about it and asking, why did you have it adapted into a graphic novel? He's like, this is some heavy stuff. It's not an easy read. And you can't really bring levity to it in prose without lightening the stuff. But comics allows you to have the heavy stuff and a joke on the same page without taking away the gravity of the heavy stuff. And I think you thread that needle well. I never felt like the quip or the over the top superhero thing took away from the gravity of the situation, while at the same time that uh, like I said, it can be an easy read if you want it to be. If you want to just focus on the jokes and the action, it's all there. Um, so like I mean, particularly as this is your only your second comic, and I was blown away with your first comic for the same reasons. Balancing that, we're gonna we're gonna discuss some really serious issues, but we're also gonna have this be fun, have it be a superhero book, and have it fit into the world and whatnot. I mean, that's a balancing act, and you did it well. I hope that you get to do it many more times. Um, yeah. And then like also what's going through my head, I just Andrew Iden was on a couple of weeks ago and he recommended Demon Copperhead, the Barbara Kingsolver novel. I just finished reading it.
Oh, I have to read
It's all
that.
about
Yeah.
Appalachia. It's so good. It's so good. But it did kind of a similar thing to what you've done here, which is by telling a fictional story. I mean, very different subject matter, but by telling a fictional story, made something that you read about in the news and conceptually feel more real. That's the
Well,
power
I
of fiction.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'll take a Barbara Kingsolver comparison anytime. I wanted the superhero comics I like don't shy away from having something to say about the world and take a point of view. It doesn't have to be a point of view I necessarily agree with, but I sort of feel like we're missing an opportunity to use these, exceptionally well-known characters in pop culture um, and have them say something about the circumstances that the people, reading them contemporaneously are confronting. And so that's where the juice is for me. I that and giant anime swords that can kind of transform the way you kind of normally think of Iron Man's power signatures and fight style to work. We took Iron Man out of kind of 20 years of his look and brought kind of a more steampunk feel to the character without having it be like an Elseworlds style story. So like hopefully, that was there um for people who don't want to focus too much on what the themes of the book were. I guess I was trying, with this, first, the first ongoing I ever wrote and the first work I ever had for Marvel, with trying to produce something that readers who are coming to an Iron Man comic for different reasons can still latch onto. And
Right.
uh the book was canceled at 10, so I don't know if I really
Yeah, but
succeeded at that, but
they're doing that with almost every. I mean, Duggan only got didn't Duggan only get 10 before you?
on Iron Man, no, he got 20.
Oh, did he get a whole 20? Okay.
No.
But but
I'm in the record books on this.
that's
I'm
fair.
in the record books for shortest Iron Man run ever, I believe, on
Are
an
you?
ongoing. I think so. I mean, I'm sure there were people, who write some fill-in issues back when like the
Okay.
book was going for like 300, etc.
Right, right.
But in terms of like the modern era of volume whatever it was, I think we were Iron Man volume 7 of those. You ain't gonna get a more, shall we say, compact story than the Ackerman Oathlaw run.
Well, I like it. I honestly, Um, I'm friends with Chris Cantwell, who was two runs behind you. So like I can't look at his work without also having the I hang out with his kids on Zoom go through my head and I'll put yours up with his. Um, and my favorite Iron Man runs. So like so there
Well,
to all
thank
the
you.
Marvel powers that be that like decided to be done after 10.
Well,
It would
and
probably
just to quickly, because you mentioned both Chris and Jerry, I just wanted to shout both of them out. They could not have been more generous with their time and energy. They uh with really a spirit of generosity, um, listened to and helped a novice writer, um, and, and like set a whole lot of guidance for me on what I would expect, in terms of like the reception to the run. And I can't say enough good things about both of them. I not only was a fan of their runs on the character, but they uh amongst people who had written this character would really like non-gender specific brotherhood. I couldn't think of a gender neutral term. Um, whoever writes the book next, I would like to pay that forward and be part of this tradition of Iron Man writers helping one another. That's something I'm always going to remember about my time on this book.
Well, that's always great to hear. I know it's getting late in New York. Thank you for staying up with me. I'm going to ask you my favorite closing question, which is tell me something you love, preferably a comic book, but no real rules. Preferably storytelling, but again, no real rules, but something that you love that not enough other people have experienced and you want them to, so you have more people to talk about it with.
That would be Aubrey Sitterson and Jed Daugherty's Free Planet, which I believe, as we're recording this, the third issue is out from Image Comics. That book fucks. It's so good. It is the story of a post-revolutionary, post-liberation, uh, shall we say, space Haiti, is what I think. I feel like I see a lot of Haitian Revolution themes that Aubrey and Jed are playing with in Free Planet. And it's a story where there's a lot of tension among post-liberation factions who are confronting not just the difficulties of liberation amongst a revanchist external empire that has its sights on not letting this liberation stand, but also how to stay united in the interests of freedom with people who have very, very deep conceptions, deeply contrasting conceptions of that freedom now that the centrifugal force uniting them is gone. And it's all that and a space opera. It looks gorgeous. There's a ton of like 1980s aesthetic influence to it. I think it's tremendous. More and more people should be reading this comic.
Well, you just sold me. It was like on the edge of my radar, and now I'm probably reading it before I go to bed tonight. Um, because I think I even have issue one.
It's great, Ted. You'll like it. You'll like it. You'll like it in particular.
Yeah, so I will be all over that. Spencer, thank you so much for joining me again. For 22 panels, this has been Spencer Ackerman. We will see you after the next page.